The FBI deported 12 children at 2:15 a.m. Kash Patel called it logistics. Just a voice off record. Off hours, speaking from a phone line buried somewhere in the FBI's 7th floor. 12 undocumented children, ages 7 to 17, were removed from a holding facility in El Paso, Texas. Delefti asiksinun the day che twanav, 40 kasiksin nibiyundis, not processed, not presented before a judge, not even warned. By the time the sun rose over the southern desert, the children were already in Guatemalan airspace. Their names had vanished from the ICE case database, sometime between 2:18 and 2:26 a.m. And what triggered it? A private note slipped from the office of the FBI Director to ICE command sensitive minors. Prioritize clearance. Minimize press exposure. Execute before Friday. The line was traced to a burner account logged from a government laptop, last seen on the desk of FBI Director Kash Patel. At no point did the children meet with legal counsel. None were accompanied by court-appointed guardians. Several had family in the U.S. with pending residency applications. 3 had ongoing appeals that, according to immigration attorneys, were well within the window of due process. 1 had already received a notice to appear in federal court, but Patel, unlike the courts, didn't wait. The plane took off at 2:15 a.m. from a restricted tarmac adjacent to Fort Bliss. It wasn't logged through any commercial flight tracker. The manifest was labeled operational discretion. No judge signed it. No public defender saw it. 12 children seat-belted in pairs, wrists zip-tied loosely under wool blankets. All phones confiscated. No contact with relatives, no notice to attorneys, just silence. One of the children, a 9-year-old girl named Moriela, had a folded piece of paper tucked inside her jacket. It was a drawing, crayons on ruled notebook paper, a child and her sister holding hands under the Brooklyn Bridge. On the back of the page, scribbled in pencil, "Tell the judge I never got to speak. I wanted to stay. I have a drawing for my sister. She's still in New York." A social worker found the drawing 2 days later, tucked into a stack of jackets left behind in a plastic bin labeled unaccompanied. By then Moriela's flight had already landed in a part of Guatemala her parents fled from 6 years ago. The image went viral within hours. No names, no hashtags, just the photo of a child's letter, and the phrase she had written in her own trembling English. "Tell the judge I never got to speak." It exploded across the internet. She never got to speak trended nationally within 36 hours. Immigration lawyers, constitutional law professors, and even retired ICE officials began asking the same question. Who signed off on the removals? The answer, no one. Patel's office denied issuing a directive, but internal emails surfaced within days, showing senior staff instructed to fast-track non-flagged minors with known family risk narratives and to avoid judicial complications. That phrase, avoid judicial complications, became the line that broke the system's back. The American Civil Liberties Union filed an emergency petition to the Supreme Court. Attached to the motion was Moriela's note, now scanned and embedded as Exhibit A. One lawyer, speaking before cameras outside the court steps, said it plainly: this wasn't an expedited removal. This was the premeditated eraser of a child's due process. The Constitution doesn't blink for convenience. And that's when the court stopped blinking. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, herself, a former public defender who once represented juvenile migrants, issued the first emergency response. She didn't wait for the usual procedural labyrinth. She didn't defer to political noise. She read the letter, then she read the statute. If the law can be outrun by chartered planes, Jackson wrote in her response, then we do not have a system of justice. We have a race, and these children were never trained to run. A summons was issued for Kash Patel. The date was set, the chambers were opened, and suddenly, the most powerful law enforcement official in the country was being pulled, not by politics, but by process. It didn't matter that Patel claimed national security concerns. It didn't matter that his allies shouted executive discretion. What mattered was a piece of paper with a child's handwriting. What mattered was a single sentence that couldn't be walked back. Tell the judge I never got to speak. Now the judge had heard her, and she had questions. The courtroom didn't roar. It held its breath, because once the letter made it past the granite steps and into federal record, the question was no longer what happened to the 12 children. It became who gave the silence permission. A special session of the Supreme Court was convened under emergency docket, violation of judicial process in ongoing deportation cases, and for the first time in decades, a sitting FBI director stood not behind a podium, but under oath. Outside the courthouse, right-wing protesters crowded the security barricades. They held signs that read, "He protected the border, not broke the law. Due process is not for illegals. Jackson is playing politics." But inside there was no chanting, just marble walls, murmured shuffles, and a single empty chair placed across from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. And then he entered. Kash Patel didn't just walk into the chamber, he strolled, shoulders loose, chin high, flanked by his counsel like it was a press briefing. He made eye contact with senators, seated in the back row gallery. MAGA loyalists flown in to show support. He smirked. He nodded. He even winked. His attorney stood beside him, a familiar Fox News regular with a silk tie, and a smirk that never quite disappeared. Patel adjusted the mic. He didn't wait to be prompted. "Your Honors, there's a lot of emotion flying around this case, but emotion doesn't rewrite immigration law. Those 12 individuals were not U.S. citizens. We expedited their status clarification. That is within the scope of federal discretion." He said it like it was obvious, like it was policy, like he just filed paperwork instead of erasing people. There was no audible gasp, but someone dropped a pen. The solicitor for the court rose. A woman in her 40s, former prosecutor, voice like steel wool wrapped in silk. Let the record reflect. No judicial order was issued authorizing the removal of the 12 minors. No attorney was present. No guardian was contacted. No court date was set. There is no docket entry. There is no legal footprint. She paused, turned to Patel. "Director Patel, would you please provide the legal basis by which these children were removed from U.S. custody, while still awaiting judicial proceedings?" Patel didn't flinch. "We operated under emergent removal protocols within federal discretion, same ones used post-9/11. Justice Jackson leaned slightly forward, not interrupting, not even frowning, just watching. The solicitor continued. "And who determined the emergence? Where is the declaration? Who signed it?" Patel's lawyer interjected. "My client does not recognize that such declarations are required under discretionary removal. He acted to protect the system from legal manipulation by third parties exploiting procedural gaps." Jackson finally spoke. No raised voice, no gavel, just 6 words. "Clarification does not preempt the Constitution." The room didn't move. No one coughed. A marble stillness. Jackson closed the folder in front of her, not slamming, not dramatizing, just closing. "You expedited what was not yours to judge. You bypassed what was not yours to outrun. You turned due process into a logistical inconvenience." There was no rebuttal. Not yet. Patel simply straightened his collar and folded his hands, waiting. Jackson turned to the solicitor. "I want the complete transcript of Mr. Patel's previous sworn testimonies before Congress. Every word, every question, every answer." She turned to Patel. "Since you claim legal memory, let's check legal history." And just like that, the tone of the hearing shifted from what happened to those children to what else did he lie about. Outside, protesters waved flags. Inside, the air went still. The system wasn't paralyzed. It had just remembered how to respond. Jackson had requested the transcript. What she got was a library, 4 hearings, 3 sworn depositions, and a televised interview Patel had tried to scrub from the internet, now resurfaced under congressional subpoena. She tapped her finger once on the binder, looked directly at Patel. "Last year under oath, you stated the following: I have no affiliation with any individuals engaged in Holocaust denial or extremist broadcasting." She didn't raise her voice. The words didn't need help. They walked into the room with a file number and an expiration date. Jackson continued. "And yet, records show you appeared 8 times on the Stu Peters show, a platform whose host is widely condemned as a Holocaust denier, who once claimed the Holocaust was overblown media fiction, and referred to gas chambers as fabricated for narrative control. His show ends with the words, 'Time to hunt the traitors.' This court is not interested in your memory lapses," Mr. Patel, Jackson said calmly. "It is interesting whether you knowingly align the FBI's moral authority with a platform that denies the most documented atrocity in modern history." The room shifted, not loudly, just barely. like an orchestra tuning itself for something nobody wanted to hear. Patel leaned into the mic. Memory fails when you're leading multiple fronts. You want to prosecute me for not remembering a podcast? Jackson didn't respond right away. She turned to Page. In your second interview, you described the FBI as a weaponized relic of the deep state. You said, quote, "It's no longer about justice. It's about narrative control." And in podcast episode 197, you said, "If I run this place, we'll erase the bureaucracy from the inside out." Patel shifted in his seat, adjusted his tie. His lawyer whispered something he didn't acknowledge. That was rhetorical. Patel muttered, "A joke." Jackson looked up slowly. "You don't joke about federal architecture. You redesign it or you destroy it." She slid a second folder across the bench. "This is an internal memo from your office, dated 4 weeks before the midnight removal flights. It includes an instruction. Use FBI aircraft when ICE manifest coordination is too slow. Not for national emergencies, not for federal interdiction, for logistical discretion." Jackson leaned back slightly, letting it sink. "You didn't forget the podcast. You didn't forget the memo. You forgot the difference between legal authority and personal convenience." Patel's lawyer cleared his throat. "With respect, Your Honor, I believe we are conflating rhetoric with reality. My client was operating in good faith under a constantly shifting security landscape." Jackson replied without moving. "Good faith doesn't redact memory. It clarifies it." Then she turned subtly, surgically to the gallery. "We talk a lot about discretion in this room, but discretion without record is not leadership. It's erased." She let the sentence linger like smoke above extinguished fire. Patel leaned forward. "You want to corner me in memory? Fine. Then remember this. What I did saved time, resources, and operational bandwidth. These were not citizens. These were cases clogging up the pipeline. We acted cleanly." The solicitor finally interjected. "You acted silently." "No," Patel said, voice rising. "We acted efficiently." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "There's a difference. Tell that to the families they were draining." Patel snapped. "To the field agents who had their hands tied by lawyers citing imaginary clauses." "Imaginary?" Jackson asked, calm. "Yes, imaginary." She nodded slowly, almost with pity. "Then let's imagine something together. Let's imagine that a child, not a citizen, still had a right to be heard. Let's imagine the plane didn't leave. Let's imagine that due process wasn't an obstacle, but an oath." Patel looked away. Jackson turned back to the bench. "I request a secondary witness be called. Someone who logged those flight authorizations. Someone not suffering from memory degradation." Her voice was now surgical steel. "Because if forgetting is your defense, Mr. Patel, then clarity must become the prosecution." The room had already shifted. The floor beneath Patel's defense had started to creak, not from shouts or verdicts, but from something colder. Records. She tapped once on the folder handed to her by the solicitor, then without looking up, "Bring in the witness." The side door opened. A man in his late 50s walked in. Flight uniform. No medals, no gestures, just the weight of someone used to logging miles without applause. Captain Lionel Curthers, former Air Mobility Command, current contractor for federal charter operations. He was sworn in. He didn't look at Patel. "Captain Curthers," Jackson began, "please walk us through the logbook entry for flight Delta Romeo 147 dated April 5, 2002, 2:15 a.m., originating from Fort Bliss." He opened his notes without hesitation. Flight was logged as sensitive cargo children. The manifesto included 12 minors, all listed as no legal representation. Final destination classified. Orders received via a secure channel originating from an FBI flag node, Office 7B, and the timing of that flight. Executed 36 hours prior to the scheduled administrative review of their immigration status. Jackson nodded. "Was any legal counsel contacted?" "None." "Any court oversight?" "None." The solicitor interjected. "Do you have a copy of the instructions received for this operation?" He held up a printed email chain. Directive was titled, "Avoid media conflict. Execute pre-Friday." Secondary line stated explicitly, "Do not inform legal counsel until after departure confirmation." Murmurs rippled. Patel leaned into the mic. "I was coordinating multiple agencies. I didn't micromanage midnight flights, Jackson responded. I steady, but you initiated them. And they departed while the law was still on the tarmac. Captain Kurther spoke again. This wasn't the first late-night flight I conducted with Mr. Patel's clearance. There was a prior instance, Washington, D.C. to Miami, departed 11:48 p.m. The room paused. Jackson turned her head slightly. Was that a child transfer? No manifest submitted. Destination Four Seasons Hotel, 2 blocks from Live nightclub. Jackson's eyes narrowed. She turned to Patel. Do you have an official travel document for that flight? Patel shifted. I travel often. I operate across multiple time zones. Justice does too, Jackson said. But it doesn't drink under neon lights. Laughter flickered, dry and brief from a journalist's throat in the gallery. Then silence returned heavier. Jackson turned back to Kurthers. Captain, in your estimation, were these flights consistent with standard operational protocols for emergency deportation? No, Your Honor. Emergency deportations are flagged by DHS. These were logged as discretionary ops marked for logistical flexibility, not national urgency. The solicitor stepped forward. Captain, are you aware of the fuel cost for these chartered flights? Approximately $26,000 per hour per aircraft. And how many such flights were conducted under this protocol in the last quarter? Kurthers looked down. 9. Jackson tilted her head. 9 flights without judicial review, without budgetary authorization, without documentation beyond a hallway whisper. Patel's lawyer stood. Objection. Characterization. Jackson raised her hand slightly. Overruled. Then she turned to no one in particular, not to the lawyers, not to the witness, just to the room itself. We are watching a government expense report dressed as an eraser campaign. We are being asked to ignore the silence because it didn't scream. But let me be clear. Then this logbook is a testimony. The child didn't speak, but the jet fuel did. The moment snapped. Kurthers was dismissed. Patel exhaled too quickly. The solicitor stepped forward once more. Jackson didn't reply immediately. She glanced at the letter still lying on her bench. Then she said, her tone quieter. History doesn't need to repeat itself to be remembered. A pause. Before the September 11th attacks, there were warnings from CIA briefings, from domestic field agents, from Vladimir Putin himself, all pointing to the same event. But power then, as now, was too preoccupied with image, not intelligence. She turned to Patel. You were warned too. Warnings don't always come in code. Sometimes they come in crayons. Your Honor, we request that the court admit a secondary view into the fiscal anomalies surrounding these flights, specifically, whether budgetary evasion was used to conceal their true scope. Jackson's gavel didn't fall, it hovered. Then with measured breath, she said, approved. We will now examine not just the plane, but the price. After 9 undocumented flights, no court approvals, no counsel notifications, and nearly $1 million in untraceable operational costs, the courtroom didn't demand drama, it demanded math. The solicitor approached the bench with a single page. Mr. Patel, the Federal Budget and Transparency Act requires that your agency submit its proposed fiscal year 2026 budget by March 1st. Today is June 6th. Where is your submission? Patel, already seated, didn't blink. It's in preparation. Inter-agency coordination takes time. Jackson didn't reply. Sure, pen once. The room held its breath. The solicitor continued. We have here a memo dated March 1st. It's from your former executive assistant. She read aloud. Mr. Patel instructed us to stall the draft. His exact words. Let's see how the Senate dances without it. Patel adjusted his cuff. Out of context, internal frustration. There's more, the solicitor said. March the submission deadline. Your office held a private event at a nightclub in Arlington. Patel said flatly. It was my birthday. Was it funded through agency allocation? Then why does the receipt show a charge to the FBI's Representation and Outreach Fund? Patel didn't answer. Jackson looked down, flipped through her notes, then spoke, not to Patel, but as if narrating an autopsy. There is no draft, no scan, No preliminary outline. She closed the folder softly. You didn't miss a deadline. You manufactured its absence. The solicitor returned. We have another internal email dated February 22nd from the same assistant. Mr. Patel said, let them sweat. Let the bureau dry out a little. A low murmur swept the room like a cold wind. Patel leaned in, voice firmer. That's bureaucracy. Anyone who's ever managed a multi-billion-dollar agency knows that. Jackson stared at him unmoved. You withheld a backbone. She let the phrase sit. Then budget is not a leash to pull a nation. It is the spine that holds it together. The gallery went still. The solicitor turned toward the judge. Your Honor, we believe the deliberate withholding of the FBI's fiscal structure constitutes not only dereliction of duty, but intentional destabilization of a federal institution. Patel's lawyer rose. That is a leap, not a legal standard. Jackson replied calmly. So is jumping from logic to silence. The solicitor resumed. The FBI labor union has filed a formal grievance against Mr. Patel. They cite administrative sabotage, retaliatory budgeting, and political weaponization of institutional structure. Jackson nodded slowly. We will admit the grievance into record. She paused and then asked Patel, do you disagree with the premise that starving an agency of funding, then calling it dysfunctional, is a form of manufactured collapse? Patel's voice dropped.
I disagree with the hysteria.
Hysteria, Jackson echoed. You call this hysteria? A national law enforcement agency kept afloat on borrowed spreadsheets, field offices forced to freeze hiring, cyber crime divisions stalled mid-investigation. And that Mr. Patel is not dysfunctional, that is design. There was no applause, just a stillness you could fold and place into the archive of a collapsing institution. Jackson turned to the solicitor.
Move forward.
The pattern is clear. The folder was still open. Muriella's letter lay motionless to stop it. No wind, no voice, just paper. Yet it filled the chamber like thunder. Patel stared at it. Then finally he snapped. This court has no jurisdiction to legislate emotions. You're weaponizing morality in place of law. No one interrupted. He stood unprompted. I see what this is. It's not a hearing. It's a witch hunt dressed in judicial robes. You've replaced the process with theater. You want me humiliated, not heard. Jackson didn't move. Patel stepped forward slightly, ignoring his lawyer's whispered protests. The FBI has become a temple for the unelected, a sanctuary of careerists who answer to no one. I only reminded this country of one thing, that no one is born to rule forever. Jackson turned her face just a fraction and said, and you chose to turn it into a museum. Patel didn't flinch. He nodded. A museum of old fear. We'll hang the artifacts of paranoia and move forward. Then why apply to lead it? Jackson asked, toned like chilled glass. Why fight for the seat just to pull the floor beneath it? Patel opened his mouth, then closed it. Jackson didn't press. Instead she lifted the folder. With slow precision, she extracted Muriella's letter, and placed it on the elevated wood of the bench. No flourish, no drama, just presence. You say this is political, she said, eyes still fixed on the letter. She called it a chance to speak. You denied it. Patel inhaled sharp. We cannot secure a nation if we stop for every pencil scribble in a holding cell. Jackson looked up, voice low but unwavering. That pencil wrote what this court must now defend. Patel's lawyer leaned forward, perhaps to save him from himself, but it was too late. The control was gone, not because someone took it, because he scattered it, trying to prove he didn't need it. Justice Jackson didn't deliver the verdict as a declaration. She read it like it had been waiting to be said long before anyone entered the room. In light of the evidence presented, and in defense of the procedural integrity of this court and its constitutional responsibilities, she paused, not for effect, for breath. Kash Patel is hereby suspended from his role as Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, pending formal review of charges, including perjury under oath and abuse of institutional authority. She looked at the court. The Department of Justice is instructed to initiate an independent investigation into potential violations of due process at the federal level. All active removal proceedings under the authority of the Office of the Director dated between January and April are to be stayed immediately. All juvenile deportation cases carried out under such orders are to be reopened for judicial review. Any minor removed during that timeframe will be eligible for re-entry and reassessment under standard asylum and protection guidelines. Still no noise, just a paper being returned to the folder. Jackson lowered her voice for the final lines, not because she needed to, because the moment had already done the speaking. Tried to bury her words in an overnight flight, but the law does not depart at 2:52. It arrives exactly when it must. This court didn't look away, and now neither will the nation. And with that, she stood. The chamber didn't erupt, it exhaled. The truth had not been shouted. It had been written and read aloud, one clause at a time, until no one could look away. The verdict didn't stay in the courtroom. It leaked deliberately, precisely, like light through a crack no one thought was there. By midnight, this court look away had reached 47 million views on TikTok. Clips of Justice Jackson laying Mariela's letter on the bench became meme templates, some solemn, others blistering. On the cover of Time, Mariela's drawing was printed in grayscale. Below it, one line in serif type. She never got to speak, but the country finally did. While the courthouse exhaled the last echoes of justice rendered, and reporters packed away their verdicts in tidy reels, somewhere far from the spotlight, a woman held on to something the system had long let go of. Her name was Ana Suarez. Her story never made it to a press briefing, but it waited. In rooms the cameras never entered. 17 months before the verdict, Ana had been woken at 5:48 a.m. by a knock on the door of the apartment she cleaned every Tuesday, but could never afford to rent. Her daughter Isabella, age 10, stood barefoot behind her as two agents from ICE explained that processing would take a few hours. They handed her a form she could not read. By noon, mother and child were in separate vehicles headed for different facilities under the logic of bureaucracy that prioritized speed over recognition. 48 hours later, Ana placed her first call to the field office in Texas. She recited her daughter's name slowly, carefully with the K to The voice on the other end paused, typed something, then said, "There's nothing under that name." She repeated it again and again. The answer never changed. What disappeared that day was not just a record. It was proof that someone had ever cared to record her child at all. In the weeks that followed, Ana stopped asking for updates and started collecting pieces of memory. The way Issa folded her socks in matching pairs, the hum she made when tracing letters, the last drawing on the fridge before it vanished behind sealed doors. Then one morning, her immigration attorney brought her a scanned document sourced from a child advocacy group working in El Paso. It was a drawing, faded, creased but unmistakably tender. Two girls holding hands beside a wire fence, sun drawn too large for the page, and scribbled at the bottom with letters uneven but full of certainty. Mariela plus Issa, we are still friends. Ana didn't need a date. It didn't ask how it was found. She only started first at the sun, then the signet. She recognized the S in Issa. It always curved backward. The tear, not because her daughter had written, but because someone somewhere had seen her. The next day, Ana traveled to the federal courthouse, not because her name was listed. She came because the drawing in her hands deserved to stand in a room where justice had finally listened. She sat beneath the final pillar in the last row where light could barely reach, clutching the page as if warmth could still be transferred from a crayon drawn by a child who had not forgotten how to wait. And when Justice Jackson finished reading Mariela's letter aloud, Ana lowered her, not in grief, but in recognition, because sometimes a child's silence reaches farther than any verdict, and sometimes the ones who hold that silence are the ones who never stopped asking if their child still existed. And though no ceremony marked the bill's introduction,
No parade accompanied the ethics reform.
Wow.
Something deeper began to take hold, quiet like breath returning to a body long ignored. At the Queen's Courthouse, Emma Suarez returned 2 weeks later.
He.
Didn't come to speak, she came to listen, to see if anything had changed since the last time justice stood near her. Even without knowing her name, this time she wasn't alone. A group of teenagers from
He.
a trip of teenagers from a nearby public school had placed a display in the lot, handwritten letters to Congress, copies of Mariela's drawing, and a glass case holding a single pencil wrapped in red string.
Oh.
A small placard read,
He.
"In memory of those erased, not from system, but from time." Emma stood before it, her hands still calloused from work, her eyes softer than they'd been in months. She didn't take a photo.
She didn't post.
She simply whispered, almost as if to the pencil behind the glass. Noner. She found you, and somewhere in the hush between courtrooms and canter, in the breath before the next verdict, is written. The country held that silence like a vow. Fox News cut to commercial when asked to replay the ruling. MSNBC aired it twice in one tweet shared over 90,000 times read, "Kash Patel tried to erase a girl with a plane, but the paper she had flew farther." In New York, Minneapolis, and Sacramento, signs began appearing outside courthouses, taped to glass or carved into oak frame. "We do not pause because we are afraid. We paused because the law must speak before action does." The political fallout came. The Department of Justice announced a full federal investigation into Patel's conduct, perjury before Congress, unlawful removal of undocumented minors, misuse of agency funds and authority. Patel was stripped of all operational control within the FBI. His office was sealed within hours. Whistleblowers emerged. Former staffers told the Washington Post that those who objected were sidelined, and that Patel ran FBI policy like a campaign rally with no room for dissent. Then came the market of silence. A press conference planned in Dallas was postponed, then canceled.
He.
Fox News pulled a pre-taped interview segment without comment. Trump, normally never silent, did not mention Patel on True Social for 2 straight weeks. The digital spotlight did, and when it did, a new one rode. The House introduced the Mariela Protection Act. The proposed law would require that no undocumented minor be removed from U.S. territory without judicial review and counsel present. ICE officials began stepping down, some admitting they'd been told to ignore the lawyers when deporting minors.
For the first time in its history, the FBI announced the formation of an internal ethics watchdog unit reporting outside the chain of command. But perhaps the most powerful silence came from Justice Jackson herself. She gave no interviews, declined all appearances. calls. calls. Yet inside the Supreme Court building, staff noticed a new frame on her desk, a scanned copy of Mariela's letter. Beside it, a handwritten note. "Let justice write what I never got to say." It didn't go viral. It didn't need to. The country had already heard it. And in a small county courthouse in New Mexico, someone taped a sign to the front door, typed in black bold font. The law did not forget her. Underneath, a crayon drawing appeared. A small figure holding a pencil standing before a courthouse,